Kishore, my dear friend, welcome to this interview to Inconvenient Questions. I will try and make it as uninconvenient as possible. Right. First and foremost, congratulations on the launch of your 10th book. Is it your 10th book?
10th book, yes.
Yeah, and it's amazing that you have written 10 books over a period of, what, 26 years?
Yeah, 26 years. But I produced 5 books in the last 7 years.
So you are a lot more productive
since I stepped down as Dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy.
Why? Is that because
if you don't have a full-time job, I can do full-time writing. And then this amazing book, the Asian 21st Century, which has had 3.58 million downloads.
Oh, that's the one that went online.
It went online. Yeah. And I must say, I did that book with great resentment.
Why?
Saying, why am I wasting my time producing a free book? They were targeting 20,000 downloads. And they got 3.58 million. 8 million. I mean, and that's amazing.
Now,
in 160 countries, by the way.
It's amazing. I was going to ask you, because one would think that it mainly the Chinese who would download, and that's probably where the numbers came from. But you're saying more than 100 countries.
Well, I can tell you the top 5 countries.
Yeah.
And by the way, this book was in English, not in Chinese. The country with the largest number of downloads was Malaysia, was 700,000. Singapore, with 600,000.
600,000.
I had no idea that Singapore had 600,000 book readers. Amazing.
Did you have a lot of pictures about
Number 3, no pictures at all. 0 pictures. It's all essays. None of my books have pictures. And then the third one was, I think, United States. Number 4 was Australia. Number 5 was China.
So, Kishore, let me take you to the most recent book you launched, your memoir. It's titled Living the Asian Century, an Undiplomatic Memoir. Right. Now, you were very blunt, actually, about yourself. I was quite surprised when I read that in your early transcript. You said, and I quote, "I must have come across as being very cocky and self-confident, and when you are cocky and self-confident, you invite detractors." You said that. You know, I must confess, the first time I met you professionally was when I was a producer in Current Affairs Division in SBC in 1984, and I did think you were cocky. And I did think you were cocky because you had a smirk, and you also did not look at me when you spoke to me. You know, there was an eye contact. You know, so quick question: you project yourself as being very self-confident, but I read it as seriously insecure. Were you?
Well, in my book, I describe how insecure I was. You know, when you come from a very humble upbringings, and I try to describe, as you know, my humble upbringings. When I went to school at the age of 6, I was put on a special feeding program because I was technically undernourished. Now you can see I'm overnourished.
And you're on the milk program, right?
And the principal called about 12 boys. I mean, there must have been maybe 100 boys who joined the school, primary 1. And the only 12 were selected to go to the principal's office at recess time, and there was 1 pail of milk, 1 ladle. So all 12 boys drank from the same ladle, passing on our germs to each other, which is
no
good.
wonder you're so strong.
Because you develop your immune systems.
Yeah.
And, you know, our house had no flush toilet.
This is your house in Onan?
Onan, 179 Onan Road, which is amazing. The house is still there.
Yeah.
It's quite shocking. It hasn't been torn down. And we were paying rent of $17.60 a month. But even that was a challenge. And when my dad lost his job and borrowed money, the debt collectors would come to our house. And sometimes when the Chinese gangsters came, my dad would look terrified and roll under the bed when they came, you know. So we we lived through a lot of stress. There was no flush toilet in the house. The guys coming in the morning to remove the cans. So it was a very different Singapore that I grew up in. So,
and made you tough and tougher
yeah,
and more,
I think
more resilient?
but in fact, one of the best blurbs I got from my book was one from one of the most famous men in the world. His name is Martin Wolf. He's a chief economics commentator for the Financial Times. And initially he was hesitant to give me a blurb, but after he finished reading the book, he gave me this incredibly enthusiastic blurb. And then he said, Kishore, you know who's the real hero in your memoirs? I said, who? He said, your mother. And it's true, because my mother went through hell. As a child, you don't experience the same kind of hell that the parents go through. And to me, what I always remember is that no matter how amazing the pressure on her was, no matter how, when you live in a broken, dysfunctional home, the daily pressures, she never broke down.
Right.
So for me, my motto in my life was that if my mother, who went through hell, never broke down, how can I ever break down? So,
and in fact, there was an interesting line, right? She told you to put butter on your lips.
That's right.
And smile.
And she taught us that even when you're feeling hungry, don't tell the world you're feeling hungry. Just put some butter. Actually, I think what she would have said probably was ghee. Put ghee on your lips and smile and tell everyone you're very well fed,
Yeah.
But so, she basically, more by example, she taught us courage and endurance. So I think that gift from my mother was enormous, and I've never had a chance to say a proper thank you to her. And I hope that this book, as Martin Wolf says, is in many ways a tribute to the woman who saved me.
I think that explains, to me at least, explains how you have often bounced back even when you are punched in the nose. And I'll come to that in a while, but that's the imagery I have, You've had many detractors. You've had clearly detractors.
I want to submit an entry into the Guinness Book of World Records.
Number of detractors.
Number of detractors. I think I'm number one in the world.
Maybe you are underestimating your lack of popularity. No, actually, I think the number of detractors you have is not as high as one would imagine. It's just that sometimes the detractors have louder voices. Right. Now, one of the detractors is Professor Donald Emerson, who was a long-time head of the Southeast Asia program in Stanford University. He's clearly not a big fan of yours. He's written quite extensively, very critical of you intellectually, for example. This is what he said about you. Mahbubani is entirely right to acknowledge the massive improvement in the material welfare of China's people that has taken place under its authoritarian regime since 1970s. But in its writing, Mahbubani has been far less willing to acknowledge the historical fact of bad governance in China, whose Maoist regime was responsible for the deaths of an estimated 40+ million of its own citizens between 1949 and 1975, not to mention the official repression of Tibet. What's your response?
Well, I know Don Emerson. When we were together, he would have described himself as a friend. There's always a personal dimension to all this. And Don Emerson saw himself as a leading Southeast Asian scholar, and he did some good work on Indonesia. But I think he resented the fact that more people were paying attention to me than to him.
How do you know that?
I was in several panels with him. I know him very well as a person. So I think what I found.
Are you being smug?
Huh?
Are you being smug?
Not being smug. I know him very well, and I feel sorry for him that he had to do that. And the point about him is that he will take selective quotes and not see the whole picture. And for him to dismiss the achievements of China was a sort of clever rhetorical tool that he used, But he's not a China specialist. And he actually got used to being treated like God when he went to Indonesia. And then he found that over some time people got disillusioned with him. So, I mean, there's a personal side to this story.
But what he said, what he cited, are not untruths. For example, the repression in Tibet. We shan't go too deep into these, but I'd like to move away from Don Emerson and come closer to home. Let's talk about the aggressive stance adopted by China in the South China Sea, in direct confrontation with the Philippines. Right? That has had an impact on us, on ASEAN. I've not seen you highlight that or comment on that. Did it not matter to you enough?
Well, then I would encourage you to read The New Asian Hemisphere.
Okay.
I produced 10 books, right, this year. And in the New Asian Hemisphere, there's a section on the South China Sea, and in which I say that the 9-dash line that China has drawn in the South China Sea has no basis in international law at all. And I've also pointed out that it's been a huge mistake, a huge strategic mistake for China to try and claim any kind of sovereignty over the South China Sea, because what that does is that it undermines the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, and it undermines the territorial rights to whatever it is, 10 miles, 12 miles, whatever it is, and the EEZ to 200 kilometers, because it undermines China's interest, because China is now a bigger maritime power than the United States, much bigger. There are more Chinese goods traveling on the seas than American goods. American hardly exports any manufactured products. China exports amazing amount of manufactured products. So China needs open access to the seas. So China needs a global regime whereby countries will not claim large bodies of water around them.
But you did say categorically that what China did in the South China Sea was not legal.
Did you say that? I said the 9-dash line has no basis in international law. Okay. By the way, in common English, it means it's not legal.
Absolutely.
偷偷告诉大家，我最近发现了新法宝 Royal Face 逆时奇迹系列，它有活肤露、全效精华，还有精华霜。尤其我皮肤比较偏干，所以我非常的注重保湿。保湿做得好，肌肤自然烹饪。提亮肤色更年轻，抚平皱纹超有感，而且气色变好。用心保养，每天都更美一点。美吧。